Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be looking at 3 new Kizer releases. First up, we have the Kizer Invictus. This is a collaboration with Damn Designs. I owned one of the original Damn Designs Invictuses that he released himself. This particular one's in D2 steel. I gotta say, I was pretty impressed whenever I reviewed this 2 years ago with how well this thing performed and how good it felt in hand. Not to mention, it had an outstanding action. We'll see how this one stacks up. This is the second design collaboration from Damn Designs. The first one was his Mad Tanto design, a very popular model and one that I like a good bit. So with this one, you got a nice drop point blade with a full flat grind of 154 cm steel. Nice effective row of jimping there, really grabs the thumb nicely. You got a very fine, precise point there for piercing tasks, doing drag cuts. And you got a nice, beautiful raw stone wash finish there. I absolutely love it. This knife comes in at $75, and I think it is very well priced. Now, because of the way the first one that I had performed, I was really excited to see how this one compared to that one. So I started testing this one right away. It came absolutely ridiculously sharp. Kizer has been really nailing it with their sharpness out of box, and this thing immediately kind of wowed me whenever I started doing the cardboard. It was a very fast cutter. That full flat grind allows it to pass through the material very nicely. That low drop point, even though it's pretty much all belly there, I had no problem sliding out of the cut, at least with the size cardboard I was breaking down. And it just didn't feel like it was slowing down at all. I mean, very slicey, very capable blade. It has a 3.4 inch blade there, so, you know, you're definitely going to be able to do a lot of stuff with that. Brought it over to the wood to test the ergos, see how it wanted to bite into the wood, and see how it was going to feel after I started, you know, really bearing down into the wood. It was making fine curls very easily. Of course, it wanted to bite, and it wanted to bite deep. These scales on the knife, they're nice and wide, so they really feel out the hand nicely. They got a nice little subtle contour by putting these large chamfers on both sides, and that micarta is very comfortable. Then I brought it to the sisal rope, and this is the test where it's either make or break if it's going to excite me on how it performs or it's just going to kind of flop. And I gotta say that belly helps tremendously with cutting on a flat surface. It makes it to where I can either do a sawing motion cut, push down cut, pull cut. It's going to really excel at cutting on a flat surface. And with that thin edge geometry, that sharp edge, this thing was blasting through the 1/2 inch sisal rope. It has a lot of bite to this edge. That's another thing that I've been noticing with the Kizer edges here lately. They're not only sharp out of box, but with some toothiness, and that right there is my favorite edge because it does well on everything that I test it with. It never felt, the entire time I was doing the sisal rope cutting, it never felt like it was slowing down at all. Usually it shut it down around 80 cuts with 154 cm, but this one was feeling so good that I ended up cutting 110 cuts before I ran out of the piece I cut with it. And there was no doubt about it. It could have definitely cut more. Now, I knew I did have another portion of testing to do, so I didn't want to go too far with it. Then when I got to the last portion of the testing, I was wondering if that edge was still any good. But right away, you know, using that tip to drive through the leather, it was like a scalpel up there in the front. And that tubing, I had barely any friction going through both of them. That stone wash finish keeps it nice and smooth. And that sharp edge bevel gets the cut started a lot quicker. And then whenever I get to the 10-ounce denim, that's where I saw that it still has bite to that edge, really putting a smile on my face. Let's see what it's like now. That's why I like the 154. The action on this one, I like how they have this flipper tab done like that. It's very comfortable because it's canted back. It has jimping there, and it rockets out. Then once you release that button, absolute free dropper, no friction whatsoever. It is riding on ceramic ball bearings, making it silky smooth. So comfortable and snappy. The handle scales, like I said, during the cutting were more comfortable because of this canvas micarta, and very grippy. They left it to where it's got the actual canvas showing instead of the epoxy. I love that. You have a recess spot for the button so you don't accidentally disengage it. You have the decorative pivot from Damn Designs, just like on the original, except it's a little bit smaller. You have a Torx T8 for the pivot. Unfortunately, they went with T6 for the body screws. Look at that hidden filler tab right there for the reversible side of that pocket clip. You have a deep carry that goes over the handle scales. They inset the clip and the screws have been countersunk. Excellent job. You have the same color micarta for the back spacer. You have inset stainless steel liners in there that have been heavily skeletonized. And this one is a good bit lighter than my original. This one comes in at 3.943 ounces. The original came in at pretty much 5.2 ounces. The lockup is good. As you can see there, it does have a light audible stick to it, but I prefer that just so I know it's locked up solid. And here's a quick size comparison with the Ontario Rat 1 and 2. Nitpicks and complaints, I would have liked to see this sharpening choil a little bit bigger. However, I can open it up myself. I don't have to worry about anything back here. I would have liked to see T8 hardware all the way throughout. You know, as it sits, I think this is an outstanding knife, great performer, comfortable, good action, solid overall knife, and would make a great knife, especially if you don't already own an Invictus. Next up, we have the Kizer Justice. This is the second generation of the Justice. The first one did not do so well. At least I didn't think so. And I passed on it. And I'm really glad I decided to check it out this time. They also have the Justice 2 fixed blade that I like a good bit. This is a larger EDC knife, comes in at 8.5 inches long, so nice full-size EDC. You got a nice drop point blade with a satin finish on it. Pretty robust tip there. I think this would make a great work knife. Good sharpening choil. You should have a few sharpenings before it'll start to widen back here. You do have a row of jimping. I call it moderate traction jimping. It does offer a little bit of traction. You have Bowler N690 steel here. Similar to VG10, I find it's a little bit better performer than VG10. It's a very corrosion resistant steel, and the last Kizer I tested in N690 kind of shocked me on how well it performed. This one has a kind of low flat grind. They still managed to get it to 17 degrees behind the edge, and this one's got a 19 degrees per side bevel. This one came even sharper than the Invictus, which is kind of mind-blowing. I mean, very sharp. And even though this knife has a higher tip than I usually prefer, I usually like my drop point tips to be in line with the center of the pivot or below, just so your belly won't be too crazy. But this one has a larger blade on it at 3.78 inches long, so that belly is a little bit more gradual, and you have a reasonable amount of a straight edge. So whenever I started doing the cardboard cutting, I tried to do some longer cuts. I had no issues sliding out of it, and man, I was like, wow, this thing is very slicey. And of course, you know, cardboard's light duty as far as how much pressure you have to push, unless it's like triple wall cardboard. But so far so good as far as comfort goes. It was nice and comfortable, especially being that it was passing through the cardboard so quickly. And I was really rooting for this, hoping that it would continue to hold that edge like it is with the cardboard, but never slowed down a minute throughout all the cardboard cutting. And that was an enjoyable experience for me, at least. Then we get to the wood to test the ergos and see how that edge is still biting after the cardboard. We start light, and I'm able to make fine curls rather easily. The handle is nice and hand feeling. It's nice and comfortable. There's nothing poking or prodding me. And that pocket clip stays out of the way of my palm, at least for my medium-sized hands. With the wood, I was able to put a lot of force into it. Now, I did notice whenever, I'm sure it's because of the micarta scales, whenever I really squeeze the handle really tightly, I can kind of flex it a little bit. Nothing that I was concerned with or anything. It didn't do anything with the lock, but just something I wanted to mention. We get to the leather, and you can get that tip down to do drag cuts. Now, you are lifting it up a little bit higher, you know, it's probably a little bit easier just to use that front portion of that belly to pull through. And like I said, being that it is a drop point and it has that belly, cutting on a flat surface was very, very easy, especially with that longer blade. It made sharp work of everything I threw in front of it. The denim, yeah, it felt like I was cutting a plum or something. It was so easy to cut through the denim. And we move on to the 1/2-inch sisal rope. And this is where I'm curious. I decided I was going to push the N690 a little bit further than I normally do with the lower steels like 154, N690 and stuff like that. I usually stop them around 80 to 90. That's usually about how long, I know about how long of a piece I'm cutting there. But I decided to take it a little bit further just to see because of how good that edge felt. And I got to say right away with the first cut, just like the Invictus, it has excellent bite to it. That drop point made it very easy to cut into the sisal rope. Once again, you can do the push cut, you can do the pull cut, you can do the sawing motion cut. All of them are going to work great. You can go with that belly to cut into it. You can go closer to that tip. Wherever you want to cut it, you can do it pretty easily. And it was comfortable in the pinch grip. The micarta gave me a lot of extra grip, especially with the gloves on, and I didn't get any blisters from this knife. Tested 5 other knives whenever I was testing this one in the Invictus, and all the other ones kind of gave me a nice large blister on the finger. But we end up cutting 140 cuts of 1/2-inch sisal rope, and that's just where I had ran out of the second piece I cut. And I decided just to shut it down there before I started getting some blisters. But man, I definitely felt like I could have kept going. We'll test the edge on this one as well, but I think it's still good. I felt it with my fingernail. I have no chips or no rolls in the edge. So I'm pretty confident that this thing's still nice and sharp. And for the price point, I think it's definitely worth the money. I'll be kind of surprised if this knife is dull or, you know, not. This is still phone book paper, so it's still very, very smooth. I mean, still very, very thin paper. Let's go by that tip. Look at that. That is amazing. So, yeah. Sorry, that was my fault. I think that is definitely a pass. The action on these knives is outstanding as well. You have flipper tab and thumb studs. You got a well-placed flipper tab above that pivot. This thing rockets out. And it's a free dropper. Then you have those thumb studs that rocket out. It's riding on ceramic ball bearings with the ceramic detent ball, giving it that glassy smooth action. This second generation of the Justice folder comes with denim micarta scales from Lithuania. At least that's what the literature said. Got the 3 milled lines in there. It's flat scales, but they've been chamfered all the way around. No sharp spots where you don't want them to be, and that micarta feels nice in hand, and it's very, very grippy. There's 3 different colors. I know you can get it in red, and there's one other color. You have a lanyard hole, stainless geared backspacer that is a little bit raised. I don't ever notice those whenever I'm cutting. You do have a glass breaker on the end of it, and I'm pretty sure you can remove that because there is a hole in the inside. I think you can remove it. I just didn't take this one apart. You have a deep carry clip that is reversible and sits fairly deep in the pocket. This is a big knife, so it is a little bit more weighty at 4.89 ounces. You could tell you have a knife in your pocket, but it didn't weigh me down. One thing I forgot to mention, you have a Torx T8 pivot and T8 for the body screws. Love seeing that. They have been heavily skeletonized to try to bring down the weight like y'all just saw. The lockup's about 30, maybe 40%. Good access to that lock bar because this comes down lower. Nice and comfortable to disengage it. Rock solid. I have no play, no up or down, no left or right. Very, very tight lockup. As you can see here, it's about the same length as the Ontario Rat 1. Nitpicks, complaints, I could have done without the stainless steel backspacer. I would have much rather say a micarta one. It would have helped the weight a little bit. And I'm not the biggest fan of the glass breaker. But like I said, if I can remove that, it's not really that big of a deal. Overall, though, I'm very, very happy I decided to check this one out. And I think it's a really, really nice offering. These come in at $73. I could highly, highly recommend it. If you like the overall look of this knife, you won't be disappointed by the performance and the action of this knife. At least with mine, I thought it was outstanding performer and very, very fidgety action there. Lastly, we have the Kizer Beyond, and this is a new designer, and this is his first design with Kizer. It's a very futuristic looking design. You have this clip point tanto blade, satin finish on it, long row of effective jimping. The sharpening choil could be a little bit bigger because it's going to start flaring right after the first sharpening. However, you can open it up yourself because you don't have to worry about that stop pin. It sits on the other side of it. You have dual fullers on both sides that go into that opening hole right there. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And I'm not the biggest tanto fan, but I didn't mind this one. I was kind of worried about the ergos because of how this handle's shaped. We did all the normal testing with this one. This is in S35V in steel, and it came sharp. Now, it wasn't as sharp as my Invictus and Justice, but it was still sharp out of box. Of course, being this is a tanto, you have that straight edge portion, so it's really going to be a powerful blade shape. And it's going to excel at things like cardboard, any in-hand cutting. And once we did get to the wood to test the ergos, I was kind of surprised. I thought this handle, like I said, was going to be very uncomfortable just because of the shape of it. And initially in hand, I was wasn't sure about it. Once I started pushing as hard as I could into the wood, I did feel there's a chamfer on the bottom portion of the scales toward the butt end of the knife. Where that corner is where my pinky lands, and I could feel it. Whenever I started doing sisal rope, I'm going to be honest, tantos, being that I got to lift it up on the block, I don't like testing. I don't like doing the sisal rope at all in there. So I didn't cut a long piece. I just wanted to see how it felt. I did, I think, like 60 cuts of the 1/2-inch sisal rope on that block, being that you have the tanto. Now, I could have used that belly portion of that tanto to do it, but it's usually thicker up there, and I already have a blister on my fingers, so I decided to lift it up on the block, use that secondary tip to start it, or just the straight edge. But I thought it did fine. It had a decent bit of toothiness to my edge, and it sliced fairly well. Now, whenever I got to the rest of the testing, like doing the leather cutting, that secondary point is really going to shine there. You can put that secondary tip from the tanto to do a drag cut, and it sliced it very, very well. When I was cutting the bungee, I did decide to use that belly at the tanto, and it worked great for that. And I also used that when I was doing the dense corner cardboard. It performed good. Wasn't as impressive as the last two knives just because they're a little bit thinner behind the edge and they came a little bit sharper out of box. But if you like tantos, then you'll probably like this one. The one thing that kind of wowed me with this knife when I first got it out of the box was the action. This is a blade hole deployment, so it's an excellent reverse flicker. But watch this action on the closure. Very, very nice action. And listen to this detent. Nice positive click there and nice positive break. Very, very smooth, very snappy. Then you have these blasted titanium scales with several different facets. You have a chamfer here, 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 just giving it that futuristic look. That blast finish gives it a little bit extra traction. A tie backspacer with a geared pattern with an integrated lanyard hole right there. And during the cutting, I was talking about something that was kind of giving me a minor hot spot, and it's this corner right here. I know they were doing that for the visual effect, but that corner right there, just whenever I was really bearing down, because that's where this pinky lands. So it may not be an issue for you. If you have large, extra large hands, you'll probably sit behind it anyway. Now, you do have a milled titanium pocket clip that is tip up, right hand carry only, and it sits fairly deep in the pocket to about right there. Your hardware on this one, Torx T8 for the pivot, T8 for the body screws and clip screws. Love it. Lockup of my knife is about 30%. Excellent access to that lock bar because this comes down lower, and you got that chamfer. It's very easy to get to. No problem whatsoever. Nice solid lockup. Absolutely no play. This thing's very, very tightly locked up. And here it is next to the Ontario Wrap 1 and 2. The inside of these scales have been heavily skeletonized on the top and on the bottom to bring down the weight as much as possible, bringing it to 3.58 ounces. Which in my opinion is not bad because this is a 7.89 inch knife with a 3.35 inch blade. My nitpicks on this one, I just wish they would have opened the sharpening choil up a little bit. I could do it myself though, so it's not that big of a deal to me. Maybe this point right here, I don't know, round it over some or just bring that all the way to the back. I know that would mess with the design aesthetics, but if you like the overall look of this knife, you like Tantos, I think you would enjoy this one. These come in at $169. I think they're very well priced. The action is amazing on it. It slices well. And I found it to be very comfortable up until, like I said, until I really started bearing down into that wood. But, you know, most people aren't doing that anyway. But overall, you know, for a Tanto, being that I don't like them, I enjoyed it. Well, that will do it for today's video. If you have any questions about any one of these in particular, feel free to ask me down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer you. These will all be linked down in the description. I hope everybody's having an absolute amazing day. I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.